Well, I'm excited to have you for our first venture into these kind of online videos with the Greater Milwaukee Committee.
Yeah.
So for the folks watching, I'm Langston Verdin. I am the Director of Community Partnerships and Strategy with the Greater Milwaukee Committee. We have a really exciting opportunity to share with you a little bit about a report from the Wisconsin Policy Forum that came out in December. Our guest with us today is Ari Brown. Ari is the Senior Research Associate, right, with the Wisconsin Policy Forum, here to talk to us about this report, Arresting Developments, How and Why Arrests and Citizen Contacts Are Declining in Milwaukee. So this was a report that was sponsored by the Greater Milwaukee Committee in partnership with our Public Safety Committee. So we're really excited to hear a little more, to dive into some of the details, but also just learn a little more from Ari's perspective, from the Wisconsin Policy Forum's perspective of what's changing as it relates to citizen arrests and contacts, what can be done differently, what's happening nationally around some of these trends. And so we'll dive right in. If that sounds for you. So can you just really briefly give us the overview? And I know it's kind of hard. It's a lot of pages.
It's a big report.
It's a big report, right? But give us a kind of overview of the report.
Yeah, so I think our big finding here, and one that might not shock people, but I think is a pretty staggering number, over the course of about a decade, from 2012 to 2023, the total amount of arrests made by the Milwaukee Police Department declined by a little over 80%. It's a large number. I believe it was a little over 50,000 in 2012, and it's a little over 9,000 in 2023. So a really, really substantial decline. We found similar declines in terms of scale for both traffic stops and subject stops, field interviews for individuals, stopping them on the street and stopping them in their cars. I believe traffic stops were down something like a little over 80% as well, and subject stops were down even more by about 98%, so almost entirely over a shorter time period from 2015 to 2023. One of the things that we wanted to do, and this research evolved out of a report that we put out in 2023 called Under Pressure, where we were really hoping to look at the entire range of criminal justice services in Milwaukee, pre, during, and post-pandemic. And we noticed the arrest trend. So this report was really an effort to kind of continue digging there. And we gathered a lot of data. We dove into specific reported offenses and arrests to try to see if there was one or a few things that have caused this. But it really was across the board. I think we'll probably get into it, but some of our lower level arrests for generally misdemeanor crimes have declined very precipitously, whereas arrests for kind of higher level crimes generally more follow the trends in offenses. But we really dig in this report a lot into what happened and why it happened, especially stacking Milwaukee up against peer cities, and digging into some of those causes.
Yeah. So, and for the folks watching, we'll make sure you have the links to this report and the previous report that Ari mentioned as well. So diving into some of the key factors, what did you find, and how does Milwaukee compare to some of our peer cities that you all examined in the report?
Yeah, so I'll start with the peer cities. What we found with the peer cities is that on a rate basis, so comparing arrests to population, taking that into account, Milwaukee did have the largest decline in arrest rate of the total 12 cities that we looked at. These were all cities that had a population between 350,000 and 750,000, so similar size to Milwaukee, and reported their data in a similar way throughout the entire 2012 to 2023 time span. So what we found was that Milwaukee did have the largest decline. But some added context there, back in 2012, Milwaukee actually had the highest arrest rate of any of these peer cities. By 2023, it was the third lowest, so 10th out of 12. But if you look at offenses as well and factor that in, In 2012, Milwaukee had the highest arrest rate, but the 7th highest offense rate of any of these peer cities. By 2023, both were 10th. So 10th highest offense rate, 10th highest arrest rate. So in a way, the arrests and offenses kind of evened out to the point where Milwaukee fell in a similar place for both across the peer cities. And I think that gets us kind of to some of our causes. I think the big overarching theme here is that there is not one specific cause of this decline in arrests. There's a lot going on. So first and foremost, we found that reported offenses did decline over this time period by around 20 to 30%, not as much as the overall decline in arrests, but reported offenses did decline. We also found pretty significantly that the staffing levels within MPD have declined pretty precipitously. Folks in the city may be familiar with this, but MPD has had both declines in authorized staffing levels, as well as issues over the years filling those staffing levels. Things have kind of bottomed out now, and with 2023 Wisconsin Act 12, in order to keep and grow the city's shared revenue that it receives from the state, it's going to need to continually improve those staffing numbers, making sure that they hit a certain point in around 2033. If Milwaukee does not continue to add officers over time, they risk losing some of that state shared revenue. So that's going to be an important facet, and we found that it's a potential cause of the decline. Some of the other factors that we saw, just kind of nationwide shifts in how policing happened. We talk about how the arrest rate declined in Milwaukee, but for each of the 12 peer cities that we looked at, arrest rates declined everywhere, not to the same extent that they did in Milwaukee, but still quite significantly in most of those places.
Did you also find offenses were declining everywhere as well?
We didn't dig as much into offenses, but generally that's been the trend. If you look kind of nationwide over time, what you see is that violent crime tends to jump around a little bit. Property crimes over the last 4 or 5 decades have been basically on a steady decline, and that's what we see in Milwaukee as well.
Yeah. Although it doesn't sometimes feel like it.
Exactly.
Right,
Yes.
for our community.
Yes.
With the reckless driving being one of those that stands out and we hear about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the data shows.
Yeah, the data shows, the decline in offenses is really a potential driver of the decline in arrests. You're not going to, arrest someone if there's no offense.
So what do you see? What's going on? What's causing that decline in offenses? Is it a change in police practices? Is it a reflection of organizations like the Office of Community Wellness and Safety and the work that they're doing, or the county's community violence intervention programs? Is that something that you looked at in this work, or maybe even just from a personal perspective, which I know is sometimes hard to throw into as you're looking at these studies? But what's leading to some of these reductions in offenses?
Yeah, this isn't something that we specifically delve super deeply into in this report. I will say that over time, certainly the effort that the city's put in with things like OVP, I'm forgetting the Office of Community Wellness and Safety. There we go. That is going to have an effect, certainly in pinpointed areas and areas that they focus on. I think just to call out one of the trends that we kind of point to, motor vehicle theft specifically really spiked during the pandemic. It's come down quite a bit since then. We can chalk up specific what's going on trend-wise in specific crimes, specific reported offenses and arrests, to specific things that we see happening. For example, during the pandemic with motor vehicle theft, there was this kind of vulnerability noticed in Kia and Hyundai cars that made them, easier to steal.
I had a Hyundai during that time.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that certainly created that isolated spike. We've seen motor vehicle theft offenses decline pretty significantly since that time, to levels around what they were prior to the pandemic. So with specific offenses, it's easier to see things like that. Homicide also spiked. That's also coming down quite a bit. That's also something that we saw nationwide, was that pandemic era spike. You can think of the kind of disruptions that we had with community, the disruptions, folks that didn't have access to social services in the same way. That's really been used to explain that kind of spike in homicides that we saw, not just in Milwaukee, but nationwide.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to specific offenses, there are those individual level trends that you can look at. On the whole, in terms of the kind of decline in property offenses, I think it's hard to pinpoint a specific idea or trend there, but certainly the work that folks are doing on the ground, to make sure people are, have better access to resources and community is absolutely going to make an impact.
Yeah. So in the report, it talks about the increase in those priority one calls, and is that the homicides and the...
Yeah. Priority one calls are really kind of the most serious offenses that require some sort of immediate response, and you're going to have law enforcement officers that are kind of flocking to the scene to deal with whatever situation is going on.
And it takes up a lot of resources
Yes.
from the police department. And we talk a lot in the public safety committee about needing to proactively work on community engagement type of policies and interactions with the community to be working on preventative type of engagement, right? Are there strategies that are working nationally or even locally that we should be made more aware of, or that MPD could be implementing more aggressively that you all have uncovered?
Yeah, I think just one that's immediately coming to mind, in certain other communities that perhaps are more well-resourced or don't see kind of the volume of priority one calls,